Hello, everyone. I'm Tom McKenzie, Assistant Director of Admission. We are going to have our next recording be about the anatomy curriculum. So I'm the Assistant Director of Admission for the MD program at Case Western, and we hope this video, along with others, will give you a pretty good lowdown and breakdown of what our curriculum looks like so you can come into your interview day and have some questions prepared and hopefully a good knowledge base of what our curriculum looks like. Congratulations again on making it this far into the next step of the application process, the interview. So again, we're going to cover a brief overview of anatomy in this video. I'll go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. So you will become familiar with the term GARLA, which means gross anatomy, radiology, and living anatomy. So we're going to talk about each of those. And we're also going to talk about sort of how anatomy is taught and what the order and the sequence is your first 2 years of medical school. So you arrive at Case Western, you arrive to start your MD in Block 1. Now you might remember from watching Christian Essman's video, or if you haven't watched Mr. Essman's video yet, Block 1 is a pretty low stress block. It's a lot of big picture items. You're going to arrive. We're going to give you a chance to transition to Cleveland. There's a lot in Block 1, a lot of big picture items kind of preparing you for what's to come. And you're also going to, yes, get out and see our patient population in the city here, kind of learn all that the city of Cleveland has to offer. But it's pretty low stress. You won't have to spend a lot of time maybe working and studying in the evenings, deep into the night and on weekends. It's much more I'm transitioning to Case, transitioning to medical school in Cleveland. As a part of Block 1, you're going to have an overview of anatomy, a brief overview, actually led by our peer handoff leaders, which are second-year medical students. We have a group of second years who volunteer part of their time, part of their summer vacation, actually, and they kind of help you transition to life in Cleveland and Case Western. They're kind of those shoulders to lean on, your peers to lean on, right? And one of the sessions that they lead in Block 1 is about anatomy. And it's a very brief overview, but they will talk about anatomy. They will talk about radiology, and they will kind of give you a rundown of what you can expect. You're broken up into groups, and each session, so to speak, in Block 1 is led by a second-year medical student that will give you a rundown of what to expect in your first year and a brief rundown of anatomy. So that's going to occur in Block 1. Block 1 is 5 weeks. At the conclusion of Block 1, you will dive into what we call the anatomy boot camp. And it's boot camp, just like it sounds. What we mean by that is it's a lot of anatomy in 2 weeks. That's all you're going to be learning is anatomy for 2 weeks. So it's a 2-week intensive immersive cadaveric dissection. This is done at our old building right attached to University Hospitals about 5 blocks away. This may be the only time you travel over to Case main campus for your instructional time while you're in the MD program. Everything else is on the health education campus. The dissection labs are all located on main campus. That's where they've been for a long time. And we have a 2-week boot camp where you have 4 students to a cadaver, and half the class will dissect the lower limb, so waist down, and half the class will dissect the upper limb of the anatomy, like waist up, so to speak. And you'll have anatomy dissection in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on your group, like a 1 to 5 or a 8 to noon, hypothetically, right? So, and in the afternoon hours, or say you dissect in the morning, in the afternoon hours, you might be hearing presentations of findings. You might be in a lecture, but it's all anatomy. You might not be in the dissection lab for 8 straight hours each of the 2 weeks, but you will definitely have nothing but anatomy for those 2 weeks. You'll be in a group of 4, all right? And other members of each group will present their findings. Perhaps they might be different than yours. You'll hear about the upper limbs if those findings, if you dissected the lower limbs, for example. In the afternoon, if you dissected in the morning, you might hear various presentations. So The schedule varies, but you get the gist. It's a lot of anatomy for 2 weeks, both in the dissection lab and outside the classroom. Okay. So that's the 2-week boot camp. It's 2 weeks, and then on each Friday, there is an assessment of what you've learned. So an anatomy assessment. And on the second Friday, there is also a ceremony where we honor those that have dedicated their bodies for critical research and education. Okay. So that's the anatomy boot camp, and it all takes place on main campus for the most part. The dissection piece is on main campus. So then after the 2-week boot camp, you'll transition to block 2. Okay. And that's where you will have the GARLA, the gross anatomy, radiology, and living anatomy. So you have histopathology, Microsoft Hollow anatomy, radiographic anatomy, living anatomy, physical examination, and ultrasound. So living anatomy, we have a skills and simulation center physically on site here at the health education campus, and you will practice anatomy on a living, breathing human, physical examination on a living, breathing human. You'll also be introduced to radiology. We have actually a radiology reading room physically located in our building attached to our digital anatomy suite. In the digital anatomy suite, kind of the main area of the suite next to the radiology reading room, is where you will have the opportunity to learn about Microsoft Hollow anatomy. So this is kind of more of the continuation of dissection, except it's done more digitally. So what will happen is you will put on a set of hollow anatomy glasses, and it's called augmented reality. So what that means is I see you, you see me, we see everything in this room, and we see the digital content of the human anatomy inserted into the room as if it's already there. You'll see a hologram of the human anatomy. It is a pretty surreal experience. You'll have 4 students to 1 hologram during anatomy teachings, just like 4 students to a cadaver during dissection. And you can see pretty much everything you can see in dissection digitally. I can actually stick my head up into the digital cadaver and see like the chest cavity and the thorax, and I can see how the diaphragm and the lungs all move. It's a pretty surreal experience. I've done the demo. I've even brought friends and family to do the demo, and they've really been blown away. So I think you will find there's really just a lot of efficiency in the process. I think a lot of dissection is don't maybe hit this structure to locate this structure. And perhaps sometimes, let's say I'm dissecting head and neck, it can take a long time to get to a particular structure of the anatomy. But with hollow anatomy, it makes it much more efficient. So you can cover really a lot more ground in a shorter duration of time. I will say hollow anatomy is probably one of the most exciting things happening at the School of Medicine right now. It's probably perhaps the most exciting thing, if I had to say. So we picked this up off the ground, this technology, in 2019. We partnered with Case and Cleveland Clinic, or we partnered with Cleveland Clinic, Case and Microsoft, Case Western, excuse me, partnered with Cleveland Clinic and Microsoft. And we ran a 3-year pilot from 2016, 16, 17, and 18. And then we were in a good position moving into our new building in 2019 to pick this up off the ground and make it a requirement for all of our students. The volunteer pilot, we just had 30 students each year volunteer to learn anatomy, essentially digitally with the HoloLens goggles. And the feedback was very strong, and the exam results were virtually identical. And now here we are 5 years later, and the anatomy curriculum hasn't missed a beat. Kind of a fun fact, during the pandemic, we actually, in like the heart of the pandemic, like March, April, spring 2020, we actually shipped and sanitized over 170 HoloLens goggles to all 170 of our medical students. So they were able to learn anatomy through like the comfort of their home, safe and secure, all of that. So we never really missed a beat with anatomy. We have a huge digital anatomy suite on site, no natural light, same with the radiology reading room, and we have our huge skills and simulation center on site. We're very fortunate to have all these things too. The only time you have to travel anywhere is on main campus, which is about a little less than a half a mile. Take the shuttle, or you can walk. It'll be August when the boot camp happens, so I promise it'll be warm, so tolerable to walk if need be. And other than that, everything else beside the boot camp is here at the health education campus. So, you have gross anatomy, radiology, living anatomy. It kind of goes on a rotation base, right? You'll start, maybe you'll have living anatomy, you'll go into hollow anatomy, and then you'll have image anatomy in the radiology reading room. So you'll have anatomy starting in block 2, I would say consistently on a most likely a weekly basis. Depending on your group, the schedules will vary, but most likely probably on a Tuesday or a Thursday. And that's really the anatomy curriculum. That is the only time you are going to spend in the dissection lab, is during that 2-week boot camp immediately following block 1. Now, we do have what we call an applied anatomy pre-clerkship elective. You perhaps heard about the many, over 200, I think now, pre-clerkship electives that are offered. We have a applied anatomy elective, which gives you the opportunity to dissect beyond the 2-week boot camp if that's something that you're interested in. We call that our elective for our anatomy gurus, which is somewhat popular. But outside of that, that is the only dissection requirement. And then you will dive into living anatomy, physical examination, and ultrasound, which is, again, on a living, breathing human. We have our skills and simulation where you will actually see patients. And then you will have our imaging anatomy, our radiology reading room. You see an image in the hospital. You're going to have a lot of practice and prep on how to treat and diagnose that due to the state-of-the-art technology and the instruction that you're going to have your first 2 years in the classroom. And then, of course, you have the hollow anatomy, where you'll be in our digital anatomy suite, having 4 students to a hologram. And all the content will really vary depending on each block. Block 2, block 3, block 4, block 5, block is all different content. And that's how the anatomy is interwoven into each of the blocks. So hope this gives a decent breakdown. The anatomy evaluations as well. There's a small portion of the anatomy assessment at the end of each block. This is not the boot camp assessment, but end of the assessment, block 2, block 3, block 4. A small portion of the assessment is multiple choice. And roughly about a third of the assessment, give or take, are essay-based. We actually provide you with a list of essays, and then what will happen is at the beginning of the block, and then let's say they give you 30 to 40 essay questions, hypothetically, roughly, 10 to 12 of those essay questions, give or take, will be asked word for word on the anatomy assessment. So you essentially get, a quarter up to a third of the test, depending on the block. So it's essay-based, a lot of memorization, and then you'll also have the other part of the assessment is the hollow anatomy. So Christian will talk a little more in detail about that in the assessment video and how that works, but this will give you hopefully a decent breakdown of anatomy and kind of some surface level stuff, a little deep in the weeds as well. But thanks for watching, and I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen, and hopefully this was helpful in terms of talking about your first 2 years with anatomy, all right, and what to expect here as a student. Look forward to seeing everybody on your interview day.